Hey everyone, and welcome back. We're doing a deep dive today into cybersecurity. Well, in information security too, more broadly, I guess.
Yeah.
These terms are everywhere these days,
Yeah, for sure.
and it could be a little overwhelming, to be honest.
Yeah, it really can. And that's exactly why we're tackling this topic, breaking it all down to the essentials.
Right.
You've given us this great overview document.
Yeah.
So let's try to make sense of it all together.
Okay, so let's jump right in. I see our source material here starts by defining these terms: information security and cybersecurity.
Okay.
And it says that information security is about protecting all types of data, whether it's on paper, written down or on your computer, or even like just something you say out loud.
Right. And that's where the difference between those two terms, information security and cybersecurity, becomes really important.
Yeah.
Information security is this broader concept. It covers all forms of data.
Right.
But cybersecurity, that's specifically about defending computer systems and networks against digital threats.
I think most people, when they hear cybersecurity, they just think about computers. But our source document here mentions even spoken information. And that really struck me. Like, imagine this. You're talking about some confidential project at a coffee shop.
Oh, yeah.
Someone overhears you. Boom. You got a security breach right there.
Exactly. I mean, it can happen anywhere, really, even before computers existed.
Right.
Spies and governments, they were obsessed with protecting sensitive information.
So true. Okay, so we've got those definitions down. But how do we actually do information security?
Well, imagine you're trying to protect some super valuable treasure.
Okay.
What are the most important things you'd need to worry about?
I guess. I'd want to make sure only the right people could access it.
Okay.
That nobody could tamper with it. And that I could always get to it when I need it.
You've just perfectly described the core principles of information security, the CIA triad.
Okay.
And the document actually breaks each of these down. It's pretty insightful.
Okay. The CIA triad. That sounds serious. Tell me more.
All right, so confidentiality. That's all about making sure only authorized people or systems can access sensitive information. Think encryption, access controls, strong passwords. Those are all confidentiality measures.
This is like a digital vault.
Yes.
With multiple layers of security.
Exactly.
To keep the wrong people out.
Perfect analogy. Then we have integrity.
Okay.
This means making sure the information hasn't been tampered with in any way. Imagine someone hacking into your bank account and changing your balance.
Okay.
That would be a breach of integrity.
Yeah, that's a scary thought. So how do we ensure integrity then?
Well, there are a bunch of methods, like hashing algorithms and checksums. They're kind of like digital fingerprints that can detect even the smallest change to data.
So it's like a tamper-proof seal on your information.
Exactly.
Got it. What about availability? What is that?
Availability means making sure that authorized users can access the information whenever they need it. Think about a website crashing. Oh, yeah.
During some big online sale?
Right.
That's an availability issue.
Right.
And it can be just as damaging as a data breach.
Because if you can't access your data, it might as well be stolen.
Exactly.
So how do we prevent those availability problems?
It's all about planning for the worst-case scenario. Redundancy, having backup systems is really key.
Right.
Along with things like load balancing.
Okay.
To distribute traffic effectively. You want to make sure there's always a way to get to that data, even if one system goes down.
I'm starting to see how these three, confidentiality, integrity, and availability, how they all kind of work together. Like confidentiality is like the walls of a fortress.
Oh, okay.
Integrity is the guards making sure nothing inside is tampered with. And availability is the gatekeeper and making sure only authorized people can get in.
I love that analogy. The CIA triad really is the foundation of information security.
Okay.
But let's be real for a second. In today's world, a huge part of information security is defending against cyber attacks.
And to do that, we have to understand how these attacks actually happen.
Okay, this is where it starts to feel like a spy movie to me.
Yeah.
How do we get inside the mind of a cyber criminal?
Well, luckily, we don't have to become criminals ourselves.
Okay.
Security experts have actually developed these frameworks to help us understand how attackers operate. Our source material specifically talks about the cyber kill chain, which was developed by Lockheed Martin.
The cyber kill chain, that sounds intense.
It is, but it's also incredibly useful. It breaks a cyber attack down into 7 distinct stages, starting with reconnaissance.
Okay.
Think of it like this. Before robbing a bank, a thief would scout it outright. They'd learn the layout. the security measures, the routines. That's what reconnaissance is in the cyber world. Attackers gather information about their target, looking for vulnerabilities they can exploit.
So it's all about gathering intel before they make a move.
Exactly.
What's the next step in this chain?
Once they've got enough information, they move on to weaponization. This is where they choose their weapon, which is usually some kind of malware, or an exploit, and they tailor it to the target's specific vulnerabilities.
So they're building a custom attack.
Exactly. Then comes delivery. That's where they actually launch the attack, sending that malicious code to the target. This could be through phishing emails, malicious websites, even infected USB drives.
Wow, there are so many ways they can get in.
It's true.
What happens if they actually get through?
Then we move to the exploitation stage. This is where they use that vulnerability to gain access to the target system. Think of it like finding a crack in a wall and using it to break in.
Okay, so they're breaking through the defenses. What happens once they're inside?
Then it's installation. This is where the attacker establishes a foothold in the system, often by installing malware or creating a backdoor for continued access.
It's like planting a spy within the enemy's ranks.
Exactly. And to control that spy, they need to set up a way to communicate with it. That's where command and control comes in, or C2.
So they're setting up a remote control for the hacked system.
Precisely. And once they have control, they move on to the final stage, actions on objectives. This is where they achieve their goal, whether it's stealing data, disrupting services, or just causing general havoc.
This is fascinating, but also a bit terrifying. Knowing all of these steps, how do we even begin to protect ourselves? It feels like an uphill battle.
You're right. It's a constant challenge, but it's not impossible. By understanding the cyber kill chain, we can actually get ahead of the attackers.
Okay.
We can build defenses at each stage to disrupt that chain before they reach their objective.
So instead of just reacting to attacks, we can try to anticipate them.
Exactly.
That's a huge advantage. But how do we actually do that?
Well, that's where frameworks, policies, procedures, all those practical tools come in. But we need to first understand the difference between framework in this context and things like policies or guidelines.
Yeah, I think a lot of people get those terms confused, myself included.
So think of a framework as like a high-level blueprint for building a secure system. The document mentions some popular examples, like the NIST Cybersecurity Framework. It's basically a set of best practices and guidelines that organizations can use to improve their security.
So it's like a roadmap for security, but it doesn't give you turn-by-turn direction.
Exactly. And that's where policies, procedures, standards, and guidelines come in.
Right.
They provide the specific instructions and rules for how to actually implement the broader framework.
Okay, I'm starting to see the distinction here. Let's take these one by one. What's a policy exactly?
A policy is a high-level statement that defines what must be done to achieve a specific security objective.
So it's like the what's of security, but not the how.
You got it. A good example would be a policy that says all employees must use strong passwords. That sets the expectation, but it doesn't tell you how to actually create one.
So that's where procedures come in.
Exactly.
They provide the specific steps.
Right. A procedure for strong passwords might outline things like password length, complexity, how often it needs to be changed, that kind of thing.
So policies set the rules, and procedures tell you how to follow them. Got it. What about standards?
Standards are even more specific and measurable requirements that ensure uniformity and compliance. They're like the must-haves of security. For instance, a password standard might say all passwords must be at least 12 characters long and contain upper and lowercase letters, numbers, and special characters.
That's a lot more specific than just saying use a strong password.
Right.
And guidelines, those are different too.
Guidelines are more like recommendations or best practices. They're not mandatory, but they offer helpful advice. For example, a guideline might suggest using a password manager to help you create and remember strong passwords.
So guidelines are like expert tips.
Yeah.
And standards are the hard and fast rules.
Precisely. It's like if you're building a house, you've got the blueprints, building codes, construction plans, material specifications, and you've got expert advice from seasoned builders. You need all of it to do the job right.
Wow, this is really starting to make sense. It's all about having a layered approach to security, with each element building on the last.
Exactly. And what's great is that by understanding these tools, you can actually evaluate the security practices in your own life and in your work, whether you're choosing a strong password or assessing the security of a website. This knowledge can help you make more informed decisions.
This is super helpful already. We've covered a lot of ground in this first part. We've defined information security and cybersecurity, unpacked the CIA triad, and explored all the stages of that cyber kill chain, and even touched on those practical tools like frameworks and security protocols.
We have.
But there's still so much more to explore.
Definitely. In the next part, we'll dive even deeper into how to actually use these tools to disrupt the cyber kill chain and strengthen your overall security.
Can't wait. Stay tuned, everyone. We'll be right back after a quick break.
Welcome back, everyone. So before the break, we were getting into all the details of cybersecurity. We've got this framework. The cyber kill chain helps us understand how these attacks happen. But how do we actually use that knowledge to protect ourselves? It's like knowing a storm is coming, but not knowing what to do when it hits.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. And you're right, just knowing those stages of the cyber kill chain isn't enough.
Right.
We need to actively disrupt that chain at each stage. Think of it like this. If you know burglars always check for unlocked windows, you're going to make sure yours are locked up tight.
Right, that makes sense. So let's break it down stage by stage. Where do we start?
Okay, so we know the first stage is reconnaissance, where attackers are gathering intel. So this is where strong data protection practices are super important. Think about all the ways you might give away information online without even realizing it. Social media posts, public profiles, even those fun quizzes that ask for your personal details. Oh, those quizzes.
Yeah.
I never thought about it like that. But I guess that could be a goldmine for someone who wants to steal your identity or access your accounts.
Exactly. So step one is being mindful of your digital footprint, limiting what you share publicly, and just being cautious about what information you give out to websites and apps. It's also crucial to use strong authentication, like multi-factor authentication. That adds that extra layer of security where you have to verify your identity in multiple ways.
Okay, so we're locking down our data, making it harder for those attackers to even get in the door. What about the next stage, weaponization? How do we protect ourselves when they're building custom-made tools to exploit vulnerabilities?
Well, that's where security software comes in, and vulnerability management. Keeping your systems patched and up to date, using a good antivirus program, and being really wary of suspicious downloads or links. A firewall is a good idea too. It's like having a security guard for your network, filtering out malicious traffic.
So it's like building a fortress around your data, multiple layers of defense. What about the delivery stage, when those attackers are actually launching the attack?
That's where things like email security solutions come in, web filtering, and user awareness training. A lot of attacks, especially phishing attempts, they rely on tricking people into clicking on bad links or opening infected attachments.
Right, so it's about knowing how to spot those red flags, not falling for the bait. What about when things get really serious, like the attacker has already exploited a vulnerability?
Okay, so that takes us to the exploitation stage. This is where endpoint security solutions can be really helpful. Think of it like software that acts as a security guard for your computer, constantly monitoring for suspicious activity.
Okay.
These tools can detect and block malware, even if it gets past your other defenses.
So even if they break through, there's still a chance to stop them before they can do real damage.
Yeah.
What about the installation stage, where they try to establish that permanent presence?
This is where strong privilege management is important if you limit user accounts to only the permissions they absolutely need. You can prevent that malware from spreading. It's like containing a fire, stopping it from spreading to other parts of the building.
That makes sense. What about command and control, where the attackers are essentially taking remote control of the compromised system? How do we disrupt that?
Well, that's where network monitoring comes in. And SIEM systems, which stands for Security Information and Event Management. It's a mouthful.
Right.
But these systems act like surveillance cameras for your network, tracking all activity and alerting you to anything suspicious.
Okay, so it's like having a watchful eye on everything, spotting those anomalies before they become big problems.
Exactly. And finally, the actions on objective stage, the point where they're actually trying to achieve their goals. Things like data loss prevention solutions, incident response plans, and regular data backups. Those can help reduce the damage.
So damage control, basically, even if you can't totally prevent the attack.
Precisely. And remember, this isn't an exhaustive list. There are so many tools and techniques that can disrupt the cyber kill chain.
Our source document really emphasizes having a multi-layered approach to security. It's not about one single tool, but a combination of things working together.
Exactly. You wouldn't rely on just one lock to protect your home, would you?
Right.
You'd probably have a strong door, deadbolts, maybe even an alarm system. It's the same with cybersecurity. More layers of protection make it that much harder for attackers to succeed.
Good point. All of this still feels very technical, though. What about the human element? We hear all the time about how people are the weakest link.
It's true. But it's also kind of an oversimplification. I think humans can be both the weakest link and the strongest asset when it comes to cybersecurity. It all boils down to awareness and education.
Okay, how so?
Well, attackers often prey on human vulnerabilities, things like our tendency to trust too easily or our fear of missing out. Think about phishing emails. They often play on our emotions to trick us into clicking on bad links or opening infected attachments.
Oh, yeah. I've definitely fallen for those before. I think we all have at some point.
It happens to the best of us. But if we understand how these scams work and are just more cautious about what we click on, we can make ourselves a lot less vulnerable to those attacks.
So it's about empowering people to be part of the solution, not the problem.
Exactly. And it's not just about individuals. Organizations need to foster a culture of security where everybody understands the importance of cybersecurity and feels empowered to report any suspicious activity.
Right. It's about creating a culture where security is everyone's responsibility, not just the IT department's problem.
Exactly. And that kind of cultural shift requires buy-in from leadership, ongoing communication, and regular training. It's about making cybersecurity a top priority and integrating it into all aspects of the organization.
So it's not just about technology, it's about people.
Absolutely. Cybersecurity is as much about human behavior as it is about firewalls and antivirus software. And by understanding that human element, we can build much more resilient and secure systems.
This has been really insightful. We've moved beyond just defining terms and actually started to develop a framework for thinking about cybersecurity strategically.
I agree. We've only scratched the surface, though. The world of cybersecurity is huge and constantly changing. There's always more to learn. But hopefully this deep dive has given you a solid foundation to build on.
Absolutely. In the final part, we'll zoom out a bit and look at the bigger picture, the future of cybersecurity, the challenges and the opportunities that lie ahead.
Sounds great. Looking forward to it.
Stay tuned, everyone. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the show. You know, it's funny. We've been talking about cybersecurity this whole time, and I just realized how much of my own life depends on it these days. It's not just my computer, my phone, it's everything. My bank accounts, my smart home, even my car is connected to the internet now.
It's true. Our world is becoming so interconnected, and that creates both incredible opportunities and some big cybersecurity challenges. We're seeing this rise of Internet of Things, or IoT for short, where everyday objects are connected to the internet. Refrigerators, thermostats, cars, you name it.
Right, the IoT. It's amazing and convenient, but honestly a little creepy too. What if someone hacks into my smart refrigerator? It's not like they're going to steal my leftovers, but could they use it to get into my home network?
It's a valid concern. As more and more devices get connected, the potential attack surface just grows exponentially. A vulnerability in one tiny device could be exploited to gain access to an entire network.
That's a scary thought. So how do we even start to secure this increasingly complex world?
Well, one approach is to shift our mindset from kind of bolting on security as an afterthought to baking it in. From the very beginning, we have to design these systems and devices with security as a core principle, not just an add-on.
It's like that. Instead of building a house and then trying to add a security system later, we need to think about security when we're drawing up the blueprints.
Exactly. And this requires collaboration between everyone. Device manufacturers, software developers, policymakers, even consumers. We all have a role to play in creating a more secure digital world.
Speaking of roles, I'm curious about the role of government in all of this. What can governments do to better protect people and critical infrastructure from these cyber threats? This feels bigger than something any one person or company can handle.
Governments have a really important role to play on a lot of fronts. First of all, they can establish clear cybersecurity regulations and standards. This creates a level playing field and ensures that organizations are meeting those minimum security requirements. Think of it like building codes for the digital world.
Right, so it's about setting the rules of the game.
Yeah, but rules are only effective if people actually follow them.
Right, of course.
And that's where government support and resources are so important. They can provide guidance and training to help organizations implement those standards and improve their cybersecurity. They can also fund research and development to create better cybersecurity technologies and capabilities.
So it's kind of like a partnership then.
Yeah.
The government sets the standards and provides the tools, and organizations are responsible for implementing those standards and protecting their own systems and data.
Exactly. And another critical role for government is fostering international cooperation. On cybersecurity issues, cyber threats don't respect borders, so we need a coordinated global response.
Makes you realize how connected we all are. Even on a global scale, what happens in one country can have ripple effects around the world.
That's why international cooperation is so vital, sharing information, coordinating responses, and working together to develop best practices that can really enhance our collective cybersecurity.
It's amazing how much we've covered. We went from defining cybersecurity to understanding those complex threats.
Yeah.
And now we're talking about global strategies.
It's been a great deep dive, and I hope everyone listening feels empowered to take control of their own cybersecurity.
Me too. So as we wrap up, is there one key takeaway you'd like to leave with our listeners?
I think the most important thing is to remember that cybersecurity is a journey. It's not a destination. The threats are always changing, so we need to be constantly learning, adapting, and improving our defenses. It's not about achieving perfect security, because that's impossible. It's about being proactive and staying ahead of the curve.
So being vigilant, but not paranoid. Understanding the risks, taking precautions, but not letting fear stop us.
Exactly. And remember, knowledge is power. The more you understand about cybersecurity, the better equipped you'll be to navigate this digital world safely and securely.
Well said. And with that, we come to the end of our deep dive into the world of cybersecurity. A big thank you to our expert for sharing your incredible insights. And to our listeners, thanks for joining us. Stay safe out there in the digital world.